The Phoenix Suns swept the Denver Nuggets. MVP Jokic is out of the playoffs, largely due to the efforts of one man, Chris Paul, who averaged 25.5 points, 61.8% from the field, and 58.3% from three from that series. Unbelievable play. He's out indefinitely due to COVID protocols. Kurt, where do the Phoenix Suns land going forward with this development?
Corey, man, you had one job. Before we started playing the playoffs, you had to go into 2K and turn injuries off. That's all you had to do. You didn't do it. Now look at us. Like, it's just all over the league. And yeah, this is the one that the Suns had been the healthy team. The troubling thing is we don't know how long he's going to be out. It depends on obviously symptoms, but also like he comes back faster if he was vaccinated. We don't know, at least as of when we're recording this, we don't know if he was or was not. And then he could be out a couple of weeks. And that really just, I mean, we saw how the Suns looked without him against the Lakers, right? Or not, I mean, he was there, but he was, you know, the bad shoulder. He was kind of physically going through the motions and sitting the end of games. They're in, whether they play the Clippers or the more likely the Jazz, they're in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble with Chris Paul. Even if he just misses the first couple of games, you've put yourself in a really big hole that's really difficult to get out of now.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at, like you said, the plus minus with Chris Paul or with Chris Paul, it is just shocking because Chris Paul brings so much more than just what we talked about, that exceptional on-field performance. Like, he's playing out of his mind as a 36-year-old, but he brings a certain level of edge and mental toughness and fortitude and leadership for a largely young group of players who are trying. You know, this is, for the most part, their first rodeo in the playoffs, right? So going into the Western Conference Finals, like you said, getting down a game, getting down 2 games, that's a whole different equation. The chemistry changes.
Yeah. Look, Chris brought tough love to that team. He brought it off the court. He brought it everywhere he's been. He's demanding. But the other part of that that's challenging, too, is he's the guy that settles them when things get a little wild, when they're dealing with that, you know, if they start this season in Utah where the crowd is loud and obnoxious and in their face and it's kind of unsettling. Chris Paul's been there. He's done that. He's not fazed by it. And, you know, they still got Jay Crowder, but he's not got the ball in his hands the same way. It's just really tough for them in terms of what he brings to them in every aspect to be without him.
I will say, though, I think Devin Booker, the way that he operates is very stoic. You know, yeah. So I do like that. I don't think I've ever seen him fazed whatsoever, like ever.
Yeah, no, I think he's going to enjoy the challenge, right? Like, there is a certain amount of, well, hey, Devin, here's the ball. You've got to run some pick and roll. He's going to get plenty of shots up. He is good for your daily fantasy teams right about now, I think. But I don't know. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to win. Like, the drop off at point guard after Chris Paul is just a little bit steep.
Yeah, let's look at the potential matchups there. So let's say whoever gets through, what's the best case scenario for Phoenix? What's the worst case scenario for Phoenix?
I think, well, the situation has just changed because of the injuries in that series with Kawhi Leonard out at least one game, maybe more. If the Clippers are at full strength, they are a much tougher matchup for Phoenix just because of their size. Because they're going to be able to pull. Ayton has been able to kind of hang out and, you know, have big guys again to go against, you know, body up Jokic. Yes, Jokic can shoot threes, but he operates in the paint. Clippers gone small, man. There's space in the floor. You pull him out. Ayton's got to play a very different kind of game against the Clippers. Plus, again, the Clippers are just big with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George as your primary ball handlers. That's just a big, long, athletic team. The Jazz are a little more traditional. I think that's a better fit. It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. They also will space the floor and pull Ayton out and get them in scramble mode. But I think the matchup's a little better for them. And again, that one kind of comes back down to health. Like, Mike Conley can cause Chris Paul problems in that series, but we haven't seen Conley. Now we don't know when we're going to see Paul. Like, just who's healthy in that series is going to matter a lot.
Let's go to another series where some injuries kind of come up and go. And so let's look at Brooklyn, Milwaukee. Kyrie's out. James Harden, first game back. And Jeff Green coming back with a little bit of a bang. Brooklyn came back from a 16-point deficit at half to win in shocking fashion. And once again, what can you say? Kevin Durant is the baddest man on the planet right now. What do you think?
Exactly. That was Rucker Park Kevin Durant, man. Playing with him out there for stretches. And when they really started to throw stuff at him, like, to their credit, other guys stepped up. I mean, they really found some better defensive stuff the last 5 minutes of that game, but every other, look, you can't just cover him. It opens up everything else. And other guys were knocking Jeff Green, other guys were knocking down shots, making plays. And when that happens, that's a really tough team to beat. They didn't get, it wasn't great, James Harden. He was out there for a lot of minutes.
Yeah. 1 for 10 from the field, 0 for 8 from 3 points, finished at 5 points.
Yeah, exactly. Not obviously hampered, obviously slowed, obviously rusty a little bit coming back. That was just art from Kevin Durant. It's just one of those games where he took over, and to me, it was like just beautiful basketball, just so much fun to watch. Just like it was a joy to watch a guy play like that. Unless, of course, you're Mike Budenholzer, then it's probably a lot less fun. But for just as a fan, that's like you said, that's best man on the planet. We've talked about this before. I thought he was the best player in the world for a couple years prior to that Achilles injury. That was the guy, man. That was the guy.
A 49-point triple-double, 17 rebounds and 10 assists, in a Eastern Conference game. It's just unbelievable. One thing that I thought was really interesting about Kevin Durant's performance was that he was doing things that we had not seen him do in the past. He was passing the ball like James Harden. There was this one play, he was driving in the middle. He wrapped around the defender and threw it behind. It was a dime. And I was like, I've never seen KD pass like that. But that's just how good these players are. And we've talked about this many times, Kurt. It's like, what does your team need you to do? James Harden scored a million points, it seemed like, in Houston. He goes to Brooklyn and he becomes an assist machine, right? Like, what do you need me to do? Kevin Durant, we know he can score, but we had never really seen him put those kind of numbers up as far as passing and rebounds, because honestly, like, you had Kyrie and, Blake, you had all these guys around him where you never really had to do that. But then, he showed us just how good he is on every aspect of the game, and being able to find guys like Jeff Green, who was almost perfect from three-point line. Like, he had 27 points on the day, absolutely fire from downtown. Landry Shamet was making big shots. It looked like the entire Brooklyn team was willing that to existence. And it was actually really scary. There was one moment in particular, Kurt, where I thought to myself, Milwaukee's in trouble. And it was about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And I think it went it was Giannis, offensive foul, right? Yeah. And then the next play down the floor was Chris Middleton, missed shot. And then it was Drew Holiday, missed shot. And on the other end, Landry Shamet's hitting big shots, creating his own shot, hitting threes. And I was like, that is not a good look for Milwaukee. This is not going to end well.
No, you know what? I think that you touched on something that we need to get into. We don't want to take anything away from Kevin Durant and how he played and the Nets win. The Bucks were up 16 in this. Like, they controlled the first half. It wasn't just their defense. Everybody like, why couldn't they stop Kevin Durant? Well, nobody was going to stop Kevin Durant. There wasn't an answer for Kevin Durant in the second half, but they didn't score. Their offense cost them this game. They were struggling on offense, both missing shots and just not. Suddenly the ball movement that had been there was gone. There was too much isolation. They were too predictable. They fell into all their bad habits in that second half. And as the game got tight, they never got out of it. They looked like they tightened up on offense, and everything was coming up a little bit short. And you could just feel the momentum swinging, and they couldn't stop it.
Yeah, this muscle memory. That's one thing as an athlete, right? You always think about, when my back's against the wall, you just kind of do what you are most comfortable doing. And we saw right there where at the beginning, everything was perfect. They were playing great basketball, the Bucks. Then at the end, it was right back to what you said, isolation basketball. Giannis, dribble, 20 seconds off the shot clock, try to figure out a shot. Drew Holiday do the same thing. Chris Middleton, it's your turn, right? Someone was trying, they just went back to their old ways, as you mentioned. And it reminded me of that Heat series, Kurt, where remember when
Giannis,
there was one game in particular, Giannis missed a ton of free throws. And I was thinking this could be a foreshadow for this playoff run for the Bucks. They could lose a game, lose a series at the free throw line. And then Giannis late in that game had a chance to hit huge free throws and went 1 for 1. What can you do there?
He's got to be able to step up and hit free throws and make some plays and pressure that are better. This team this was the pattern from Miami. This has been the pattern for a couple of years now, that they really don't handle the pressure necessarily that well. And I don't know that Mike Budenholzer might be the fall guy for that ultimately, but I don't know how much of that is him versus it's ultimately on the players. Like, ultimately somebody's got to make a play, and beyond that, they've got to, like you said, I don't know how you get them to not fall into those habits. It's not like Mike Budenholzer was sitting in there like, don't move around. Like, it's just hard to watch. It was hard to watch them on offense and see this going, because you could feel, as great as it was watching KD, you could feel the momentum coming away from them, and them tight, like you said, the muscle memory, they were just tightening up.
But the good news about, if you're a Milwaukee fan, is you look at that performance, you lost by 6 points.
Yep.
And Kevin Durant had to play one of the best games I've ever seen. I mean, a 50-point triple-double to beat you. And Jeff Green had to go 7 for 8 from 3-point. You know, when you look at the breakdown here, you're like, okay, I think that moving forward, you know, they had to play out of their minds to even get a chance to beat us down the stretch. If we just do what we did and played the first half, we just do that for 48 minutes, then we got the next 2 games of the series. And you could see, especially in Milwaukee really stepped up the game. The Bucks stepped up their play, and it looked like Brooklyn didn't have any answers. So I think it's going to be one of those critical moments where do the Nets build off of this KD performance and say, look, we're 1 game away. It's an elimination game. We can do this. Or does Milwaukee say, hey, short memory, next play mentality, we're going to brush it off and just go back to what we can know we do? Because if we just play the game that we know how to play, we beat these guys every day of the week, which is pretty shocking to say. But
yeah, I got a feeling just going home, you're going to see a lot more comfort level from the Bucks. And this thing just to me, it seems like it's headed towards 7. And
yes,
I'm okay with that.
The players aren't, but we are. Another series, Clippers, Utah, tied at 2 apiece. Game 5's tonight. We just found out, it's Wednesday when we're recording this, found out that Kawhi is gonna be out tonight. How does that affect tonight's game?
It changes everything for the Clippers. I mean, they're not able to execute everything they want to do without Kawhi Leonard there. He is the guy who can go get his own shot, get to that mid-range, get to the rim. He's been the best player. I mean, he's averaging 30 points, 30.4 points a game, shooting 39.3% from 3 in this series. He has been the best player in the series. And if he's not out there, it all falls on Paul George. I think Paul George he's been a little up and down, but I think he's capable of having a really great game. But without him, he's not going to do Durant, right? Like, he's not capable of the level they may need. And I don't know if their role players are going to be able. I don't know if they're going to get enough out of everybody else on that roster. I don't know that Luke Kennard's going to hit enough threes. I don't know that they're going to get enough stops inside. You also just lost your best perimeter defender. Like, you lost the guy you can throw at Donovan Mitchell and make his life miserable. So I think the Clippers are in a lot of trouble, because it's not just this game. Like, it is possible he is out for the series. This is the knee. This is not the knee he had the trouble with back with the Spurs, but this is the knee that's been bothering him more in recent years, probably because he's there's just the compensation that comes with that. It's just not it's real trouble for the Clippers. The other side of that, though, is how healthy is Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, 6 straight points. 6 straight 30-point games for Donovan Mitchell. He's playing out of his mind. As you mentioned, Kawhi Leonard, the best perimeter defender on that team, he's out, and you lose his offensive production. And if Donovan Mitchell, we saw him early in the season, early in this series, just take over. Yeah. And when he does a 40-point game, I mean, there's very little you can do. I don't really think the injury from his perspective is going to bother him or slow him down, because he's one of those guys that seems like carry me off of my shield. You know, he seems like he's a warrior's warrior. Yeah. So I feel like Donovan Mitchell is gonna be fine. He's gonna push through and still provide for his team. But I do think that it's going to be, once again, when I watch that series, I circle Rudy Gobert. For me, I don't understand how he's not more dominant, because we talked about this before. Like, the Clippers, they're small ball, right? And Gobert has shown performances, these 20-20 performances, 20 points, 20 rebounds, absolutely dominant. And then this series, he's just kind of hanging around 8, 10, 11 points here or there, not really being as dominant as I thought he would be. And for me, when you think about a 3-and-D offense, like, you have to be able to suck people in the paint, right? So you have your shooters open. And Donovan Mitchell does a great job of getting people, like 3 or 4 people around him when he drives. But we also know that Donovan Mitchell, like, when he has all of the scoring load on him, when he has to score 30 to 40 points a game for you to be in a series, it changes the dynamic a little bit. He's looking to score first, not pass first, like we've seen Donovan Mitchell do. So I think Mike Conley's absence has hurt Gobert tremendously, completely kind of nullified his impact, in this series. And I need more from him, because I think he could just make a huge difference, make it a lot easier.
He does. He misses Mike Conley more than anybody, I think, on that team. But he doesn't create his own shot. He's not a guy where you're like, I'm going to post him up and throw him the ball and he can go get me a bucket that way. That's not how he operates. It's as a roll man. He sets great picks, great hands, long arms. And the Clippers, though, have been able to put Nick Batum and basically and tag off. They've been really good on their switches and just say, hey, we know you're going to lob it. We think we can block it. We think we can get in the way of this. And they've pretty much taken that play away. It's not been – they've had – in fact, last game, if you remember, they had some steals early in the game where they tried to go with that in Utah. And Nick Batum got one. I think Leonard got one where they just knocked it away. They read that play, and they've taken that away. It is much harder against Mike Conley because Conley is just a master of finding, either whipping it out then to the corner, finding the open guy, or just knocking it down himself. If you go over the pick on him and he can get under you, you're in a lot of trouble. We'll see if Conley's back. We'll see what his health situation is. But they do more out of Gobert would be helpful. You'd still like to be able to punish the Clippers for going small, and they just haven't.
Yeah, and once again, we're like splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
It's like we need more from you, and it's tied at 2 apiece. We'll see what happens there without Kawhi. Another game 5 coming up: Atlanta, Philadelphia, tied at 2 there. Who has the edge, Kurt?
I still think it's Philly. I think it really, you could tell in the last game that Joel Embiid in the second half was the knee was bothering him. By the end, he was just gassed. You should watch him hanging. I mean, he had that layup to take the lead with 8.8 seconds to go and left it short. And that's a ball mid-season. He just dunks. He just dunks and throws it down over somebody in a ferocious way. He clearly doesn't have the same energy, and they didn't get enough. Ben Simmons, 11 points on 10 shots. Not enough out of Tobias Harris. They've got to get way more out of those guys if Joel Embiid can't be this MVP level player. So we'll see where he is health-wise. I still kind of like the Sixers. I mean, they've got more games at home, obviously, but they've got to get more out of the secondary shot creators and everybody else on that team, and maybe get some more in transition. That's where it's hard to do that in the postseason when everybody gets back and everybody's hustling. But they need more Ben Simmons in an open court opportunities for him to kind of create, because that's where he's at his best. He's not a half-court guy.
I think that the 76ers have this for sure. I'm with you there, even with Joel's knee. Because when I look at these young teams in the NBA right now, first of all, I'm so excited to watch these young guys develop in their careers, and I love how they have no fight. I'm sorry, no quit to them. They always fight to the end of the day, to the very last whistle. And you can see that Trae Young, he can start off slow, finish up with 25 points. He's going to will his team to victory. He's unafraid to shoot that floater to give them the lead, right? And that's what I love about these young guys. We saw the same thing with Memphis as well, with John Morant. There's no quit in these guys. But I do think there's something to be said about veteran leadership. And the Philadelphia 76ers just have too many weapons, in my opinion. I think that even with them kind of being a little off, it's still close. It's still a close game. When you saw game 3, that was just absolute dominance, right? And that's the Philadelphia team that I'm like, there's just no way Atlanta can match up against these guys. So I think it's Philadelphia all the way.
By the way, we were talking about needing more out of Ben Simmons. We got to give him some credit. He has been fantastic on Trae Young defensively. The referees let this. Trae Young is finding out how the games are called differently in the playoffs. They're getting to be a little more physical with him, and he's kind of looking for the calls and getting teed up because he's frustrated. He is not going to get the calls he gets in February in this series. But to Ben Simmons' credit, Ben has been fantastic. He is long. He is athletic. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, and this is where that value comes in. Even when he's not scoring, he is impacting the game this way. If Trae Young is getting 25 points, but it's taking him 22 shots to get there, you live with that. Trae Young's going to get his. If you can make him, what was he, 9 of 26 last game, 8 of 26, whatever it was. If you can make him shoot that inefficiently, you've done your job.
Coaching vacancies, we've got Stan Van Gundy out in New Orleans, Scott Brooks in Washington out. What are your thoughts on these two moves? Stan
Van Gundy isn't a huge surprise to me. Let's just say that there's a lot of smoke around the league about an unhappy Zion Williamson, and any unhappy superstar like perks up every other GM in the league. Like, really? Is it kidding? Especially one that young. So there was a lot of buzz about this. Ultimately, they didn't win. They didn't get to the playoffs. He didn't have support in the locker room, but he also really didn't have support in the front office or from ownership. He just was kind of on an island by the end. And so this isn't a total surprise. I thought, look, 1 year, he didn't really have a chance, right? A year with injuries, with everything, that weird season. I don't know that it's totally fair to say he couldn't install what he want. And my sources with the Pelicans thought they would run this back and say, hey, we're going to give him 1 more year to see if he could do it. But they weren't happy. And ultimately, I think you're going to see them bring in less of a taskmaster of a coach. But for Zion Williamson now, 3rd NBA coach going into his 3rd NBA season. Like they have, whoever they hire, it's time for some stability. It's time for this system to be there for a few years and make this thing work and adjust the roster around what the coach needs, whomever they hire. But I expect that they're going to get, look, because you get Zion, because you can coach Brandon Ingram, because you've got a good team there on paper, there's some big names going to be looking at this one. The Washington game, the Washington hire, or the next Washington coach, the firing there of Scott Brooks, or parting ways, or however they're determining it, that one surprised me. Only because Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook like Scott Brooks. That was a relation. Those were strong relationships. I kind of get that they might want to move on, but it makes you wonder where their next steps go as an organization.
Yeah, and Scott Brooks with OKC when Russell was there, so that goes way back. Yeah. It is interesting too, because the Washington Wizards were atrocious at the beginning of the season.
They were.
They made that late run and got to a play and so they actually got to the playoffs, and there was almost hope there. So with that kind of turnaround and Scott Brooks being in Coach of the Year consideration, there was all these that late bloom, if you will, in Washington, and still the cherry blossom bloom wasn't enough.
No.
But so it is interesting. I think when I look at Washington, though, that's a whole nother situation, right? I mean, you have guys who are very talented, and still year after year they can't put it together. So to me, I don't understand how that system works. I just don't I don't understand what the pressure points are. Is it the superstars? Is it the coach? Is it the front office? I think that's such a complicated team, and it's such a complicated organization that it's not just a one. You can't just insert. You can't take out John Wall and insert Russell Westbrook and be great, and you can't just fire a coach and hire a new coach to be great. There's so much else that's happening there that's too complicated for my limited brain to handle.
It's going to be interesting to see what direction these teams go with bringing in. I mean, you're going to hear the usual names. I don't think Jeff Van Gundy wants a job, but he will get mentioned for every job that opens up. Jason Kidd will get mentioned, but I think it's going to be interesting with these hires. Becky Hammon, there's some, I don't want to say pressure, but there is a building momentum for bringing in a women's coach here. And Becky Hammon with the Spurs, she will get, I know she's interviewing in Portland. I know she's interviewing in Orlando. I imagine that they will at least take a look with her. New Orleans went through this a year ago, so they kind of they interviewed Jason Kidd and Udoka and a whole Jacques Vaughn. They went through a whole list, so they're kind of partway down the road. I'm curious to see that. And then in New Orleans, Teresa Witherspoon is a name that has popped up, actually, weirdly. But not weirdly, she's there's going to be interesting there. There's also a lot of interest around the league. Don Staley is another person who could get a job. I just would like to see that happen. I'm not sure where the fit is. There's no easy fit in the NBA. You go to Orlando, you've got a rebuilding team. You go to New Orleans, you've got real pressure to win now and make things happen. Same with Portland. There's a real pressure to win now there. So I'm not sure what direction they go, but there is a real momentum for a few of these coaches to really get their shot now.
And you look at historically any type of trailblazers and pioneers, you need an alignment. You need you can't have let's say, for instance, like a Stan Van Gundy or a Nate Bjork. You can't have a 1 year go with this. This is something where you have to give someone time. You have to be in a situation where ownership, GM, everyone's aligned. The players are behind them. Otherwise, you're going to set back, the future, because we'd be like, okay, well, we tried. It was a one and done scenario. It's not going to work out. So I think that is something to keep in mind, is what organization has the vision and the backing all throughout on every level to really dive deep and support one of these coaches to make sure that Coach Hammond or Coach Staley or Coach Weatherspoon has a great chance to be successful and do her thing. Because if you don't give these coaches the resources that they need to be successful, then they're not. It's that simple, right? So it's like, so that's one thing that I hope to see, just long-term vision and resources.
Absolutely. It's got to be a top to bottom organizational commitment, and the players will follow along. If you know the game, the players
know the game.
You know the game, man. The players are good.
Like Pau Gasol said about backgammon, right? She knows basketball. It's like she just knows basketball, and that's how it is for sure. I'm excited to see what happens, and we'll stay tuned, because a lot of coaching vacancies. It seems like every other day there's something. So we'll keep you abreast. And that's it for PBT Extra this week.